So, a while ago, I did a video discussing how I think Nami is 1/8 fishman, similar to how Chimney of Water 7 is 1/8 mermaid. So, based on what I said in that video, we're going to hit some similar points along with some information that I think is pretty vital to making this distinction. So, in Punk Hazard, Sanji wasn't sure if Nami's body was capable of pulling off his blue walk technique, but her body is capable of performing the blue walk technique, which does imply that Nami does have superhuman strength because the blue walk technique is a repurposing of the moonwalk technique of the CP9. So we know that you need superhuman strength in order to pull off moonwalk. And seeing as how this is being performed underwater, which I guess should be harder, this does imply that Nami does have a reserve of super strength, which I have said could be her fishman trait. But to continue, well, a very similar situation happens in chapter 675, because after the explosion dealt by Caesar Clown, Nami in Sanji's body gets up and says, "Poor Sanji's body is all bloodied and bruised, but it's so tough and resilient. I'm still alive." I think this line here is a hint or foreshadowing to what we find out later in the Four Emperor saga, because after Whole Cake Island going into Wano, there is this whole mini side story of Sanji developing into a new being based off of the raid suit that his family has, right? So after he starts using the raid suit a lot in Wano, his body starts developing and he grows an exoskeleton and has the ability to just shift his body parts back into place. So in that arc, he becomes something totally different. And I think the line that Nami says about Sanji's body way back in Punk Hazard is foreshadowing to what we see in Onigashima, which was set up in the end of Whole Cake Island. Additionally, speaking about Wano, I think Kawamatsu's story is actually going to be the story of Nami, because Kawamatsu's story is that he and his mother were in Wano, and his mother instilled in him to tell people that he was a Kappa because he might be hunted down for being a fisherman and being different, because these other races aren't known in Wano and are seen as monsters, right? So a similar circumstance could have happened with Nami, in which her parents or parent could have been a half fishman, and said half fishman got caught up in the disputes that were going on back when Bellmare found Nami and Nojiko. With that being said, what's interesting too, in Arlong Park, when we find out about Nami's backstory, there is a scene in which Sanji envisions Nami as a mermaid, and in response, Luffy draws a funny picture of her as a reverse mermaid, which is what fishermen pretty much are. This doodle is funny because it plays a bit of a twofold foreshadowing for the series, I think, because soon after the events of Arlong Park are over, we get into Logtown. In Logtown, we are introduced to our first half fishman in the series. He is a fishmonger named Sappy that sells Sanji the elephant tuna. Then, way later in the post-time skip, I believe during the Otahime flashback, we see that Nami doodle again in the crowd of all the fishmen and merfolk. So I'd have to say, I think what we see from Nami's observations in Punk Hazard are going to lead into her having some developments of her own pop off in a very similar fashion to how Sanji has some developments of his own happening in late Whole Cake Island going into Wano and then Onigashima. This is compounded on by the fact that we have seen that the funny doodle of her by Luffy much like, I guess, how the funny doodle was portrayed of Frankie back in Water 7. That turned out to be a real person. I think that is going to come back in the fold later and actually be real, like how the Frankie doodle turned out to be real. And what's funny about the Frankie doodle is that in Water 7, who do we meet? Chimney. Chimney turned out to be 1/8 mermaid. So it kind of all binds together in a weird way. I hope that wasn't too hard to follow. But to break things down, yes, this is a companion video to that video I made about Nami being 1/8 fishman, and I think this will be revealed in the future. With that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede Works It!